Myself, Satish Thalange, Assistant Professor, Department of Civil Engineering, Walchand Institute of Technology, Solapur. In today's session, we are going to see the resource planning and the management in the project. Student or the observer will be able to apply the skills and techniques which are required for the resource planning as well as management, which is necessary for the successful completion of the overall project. Now let's see the resource and its planning. The resource planning cannot be done without the 4 M's and 1 T. It's mean that it's clearly that if the activity is there, it's require the 4 M's and the T. It is necessary to have the material, manpower, machinery and the money. But the most important thing is what? The time availability should be there. The resources are the most important components of the overall project. If the project planning and the scheduling are to be achieved, it is necessary to assure what exactly the resources are required for the activity or the project to get down in the overall practical execution. Now, if we have to see what exactly the material required, the labors required to get down that particular activity, the machineries, but the most important thing to get all this, the money and as well as time availability is much more important. Once we come to know exactly the resource required, it is most important to have the overall the scheduling and to get down the activity as per the schedule. Although the resource planning phase is very much important, many of the projects get failed. What may be the reason? Due to inavailability of the knowledge regarding the proper scheduling as well as a proper management of the resource. Now, once we have assigned all the resource to the activity or you can say for the project, it is much more important to have the proper monitoring and the controlling. Now, the monitoring is much more important as well as controlling means what? There is a need of the application of all the skills or the techniques which are required for the overall management of the resource, which is most important to get down the project as per the schedule. That's why many of the projects they get failed because there are the improper planning, scheduling as well as monitoring and the controlling of the resource or the activities. So it is much more important that the resource planning we need to identify the quantity of the resource required to get down that particular work or you can say activity or the project. And once you come to know the quantity of the resource requirement and the time associated to get down that particular activity or the project, its overall the resource planning and its scheduling is much more appropriate or you can say accurate. So the resource and its planning, and I'll continue to that, the scheduling is much more important along with the monitoring and the controlling. Now coming to the resource management, as I said, once we come to the overall assigning of the or allocation of the resource to the activity and we declare the duration required for that particular activity, that is nothing else scheduling of the activities or you can say project. Later on when we start for the execution, there is much more important to see that how exactly the overall the execution is there. Means we have to go for the daily monitoring and controlling if there is necessary. There are many more techniques which are associated for the overall various stages of the project, but as we are dealing with today with the resource planning and its management, we are interested to see what are the resource techniques or the tools to get down the overall proper management of the resource. So resource management is a tool or a technique used in the developing of the or you can say developing of the resource schedule to the activity or you can say project, and once we come to know the schedule of that particular activity or the project, its proper management is much more important. That is nothing else, a schedule management knowledge. So here the resource management is a scheduled network analysis technique applied to schedule that has already been analyzed by the network technique. As we know, there are the network technique like CPM, that is a critical path method, the PERT, program evaluation and review technique, and one more, that is a precedence network technique, which are the techniques which are much more helpful for the overall declaration of the project duration, critical path, the float associated with it, a slack associated with it, which are much more required for the proper management of the resource associated with the activities. Here, once the resource management is employed, when there is a resource conflict, okay, in such a case, we have to go for the proper application of the tools and the techniques of the resource management. Now, what are the resource management techniques? Let's see. A resource management techniques are of a resource leveling as well as resource smoothing. Now, let's see what exactly it means. But before that, I want to inform you that, we have to go for the, as we know that once we come to know the project duration, the critical path of that particular project, and we are also aware about what exactly the floats and the slacks are associated with the project or the activity and the events. The floats and the slacks are very much helpful to get down the proper management of the resource. Now, how exactly it is there, we will see. But before that, in this today's session, we will see what exactly the resource leveling and the resource smoothing is mean. The comparison of the resource leveling and the resource smoothing. Resource leveling, here the resource leveling and the smoothing, as we have saying, these are the two techniques. Here much more important is to know what exactly the terminology or factors are associated in the leveling and smoothing. The resource limitation is there, that's why it is much more importance is given to limitation of the resource. Smoothing, the time limitation is much more important, which means that the resource limitation is not important, but the time limitation is much more important. Means if there is necessary of the additional need of the resource, in such a case we can go for the allocation of the resource in the to the activity or the project in the resource smoothing. The resource in the resource leveling, there may be the chance of increasing of the overall the duration of the overall project, because already it has been said that in the resource leveling no extra resource are going to be available with the overall the planning engineer to go for the scheduling one. So we have to go for the utilization of the float associated with the activities, and sometime it has been observed that in the resource leveling the floats may go beyond the overall float associated with the activity, due to which there may be the chance of resource rescheduling, and there is a, as there is due to the rescheduling, the project duration may change. But in the resource smoothing, as it has been clearly mentioned that the time limitation is there, so there is a chance to go for the additional utilization or additional allocation of the resource to the activity or the project. As in the resource smoothing, if it has been declared that project has to be complete in 1 year, that is to be completed in 1 year. Even though there are delay due to any reason, that has to be overcome by additional resource. So in the resource smoothing, we are going to assign extra resource, and but we are interested to complete the project with the earlier defined time duration of that particular project. So as we are interested where the project durations are going to remain same in the resource smoothing, but it is not observed in the resource leveling because here the resource limitation is there, but the time limitation is not there in the resource leveling. That's why it is clear that here the project duration may extend, but here the project duration may remain same. Once there is a change in the project duration, basically there may be a change in the critical path, but here in the resource smoothing, as we are maintaining the project duration of the earlier declaration, here there may be or may not be the chance of changing the critical path. So this is the overall the difference between the resource leveling and the resource smoothing. Answer for the above questions. These are the answers for the above questions. These are the references for today's session. Thank you.